I step out of my black Tesla, and the Colorado autumn air hits my face like a slap from the past. 5 years. 5 years since I walked out of this family's life with nothing but my programming skills and a promise that still echoes in my ears. Watch me. The Prairie Hills Country Lodge towers ahead, its marble entrance gleaming under the setting sun. 120 guests inside, celebrating Grandma Miriam's 78th birthday. They have no idea what's coming. My phone buzzes against my palm. Nolan Pierce, my coup, never texts unless it's urgent. The AG's office confirmed Miriam's audit backs up their case. The warrant is active. This could happen tonight. My fingers tighten around the device. Attorney General's office. Warrant tonight. The words should terrify me, but instead, I feel something cold and sharp settling in my chest. Justice, maybe, or vindication. I adjust my 3000 Armani blazer, the charcoal fabric fitting like armor. The same family who dismissed me as a failure 5 years ago has no clue that their disappointment now runs a $180 million cybersecurity empire. Watch me. I whisper to the marble steps, but even as I say it, my hands shake. The memory crashes over me like it always does. That dinner 5 years ago. The Grant family dining room with its pretentious mahogany table and crystal chandelier that cost more than most people's cars. I was 26. Desperate. Still believing I could earn their approval if I just tried harder. Playing with code isn't a career, Jackson. Dad's voice carried that particular blend of disappointment and dismissal I knew so well. Douglas Grant, real estate mogul. Couldn't fathom that technology might actually matter. When are you going to get serious about your future? Mom sat down her wine glass with a delicate clink. Why can't you be more like your sister? Marilyn, golden child extraordinaire, leaned back in her chair with that smile I'd learned to fear. Actually, I might have something for Jackson. My non-profit could use an assistant. Part-time, of course. Assistant, part-time. After I'd spent 3 years building security software that companies were actually buying. See, Mom's face lit up like Marilyn had just offered to cure cancer. Marilyn always looks out for family. The weight of 26 years crashed down on me in that moment. 26 years of being the family scapegoat. The one who couldn't measure up. The disappointment. I'd worked double shifts at 16 to pay for college, while Marilyn's education was fully funded. I'd listened to years of, "Why can't you get straight as like your sister?" I built something from nothing, and they called it playing. But it was what Mom said next that broke something inside me permanently. "I just want to be proud of you, honey. Is that too much to ask? I am proud of you." 5 words I'd chased my entire life. 5 words she'd never said. Not once. Not even when I graduated summa cum laude or when my first client paid me $50 for a security audit. The need for her approval had been my fatal flaw since childhood. I was the daughter who stayed up until 3 a.m., perfecting projects for parents who noticed nothing but flaws. I was the teenager who worked herself into exhaustion, trying to prove I deserved the same investment they gave Marilyn without question. I was the young woman who kept believing that if I just achieved enough, if I just made enough money, if I just became successful enough, they would finally see me. But sitting at that table, watching Marilyn's smug satisfaction and my parents' relieved expressions because their golden child had solved the Jackson problem, I understood the truth that would change everything. The game was rigged. It had always been rigged. They needed me to fail so Marilyn could succeed. They needed me to stay small so they could feel big. They needed me to remain desperate for approval so they could dole it out as a reward for compliance. I stood up from that mahogany table. Dad's face went slack with shock. Marilyn's smile faltered. "Watch me," I said, 2 words that meant everything and nothing. "Watch me what? Build something real. Prove my worth. Succeed without you. All of it. None of it." I didn't know yet. I walked out their front door into the October night. I blocked their phone numbers. I returned Christmas cards unopened. I built Vanguard's shield from a $1,000 laptop in my studio apartment. Coding 18-hour days fueled by rage and determination. For 5 years, I chose myself over their approval. It was the most terrifying and liberating decision I'd ever made. Now I'm standing outside Prairie Hills Country Lodge, and that terrified 26-year-old still lives somewhere in my chest, whispering that I don't belong here. That I'll never be good enough. That walking through those doors will prove they were right about me all along. But she's wrong. I'm not the broken girl who walked out 5 years ago. I'm Jackson Grant, CEO of Vanguard Shield. Forbes featured me on their 35 under 35 list, though my family never knew because they never looked. I protect critical infrastructure for 3 states. I employ 47 people who depend on my decisions. I'm not playing with code anymore. I'm winning. The lodge's entrance doors swing open as a couple in their 70s emerges, the woman clutching pearls that probably cost more than my Tesla. They don't recognize me, but why would they? The last time this town saw me, I was the Grant family failure. Tonight, that changes. My phone buzzes again. Another text from Nolan. You sure about this? I can handle everything from here. I almost smile, Nolan Pierce. The first person who saw my worth before I proved it. My coup. My friend. The brother I chose instead of the family I inherited. But running would prove they were right. And I'm done running. I type back, I've got this. Because I do. Whatever happens tonight, whatever family drama unfolds, whatever pain gets dredged up, I know who I am now. I know what I've built. I know my worth isn't determined by people who couldn't recognize talent if it debugged their entire network. The Grant family dinner table is always too big for comfort. The mahogany gleams under the chandelier, and the crystal wine glasses catch the light like they've been polished for 1,000 years. My father, Douglas, sits at the head of the table, his usual commanding posture, now a little more bloated with his latest business deal. He's always had that look, the look of a man who thinks he can control the world with his portfolio. Mom sits beside him, a glass of red wine in her hand, her smile painted on but barely there. She's always been the one to watch Dad's back, not mine. And then there's Marilyn, leaning back in her chair, with a glass of white wine, her smile as polished as the silverware. I'm 26, sitting at the end of the table, trying to make myself small enough not to disrupt the perfect scene they've worked so hard to create. So Jackson, Dad says, his voice carrying that edge of disapproval I know too well. How's the computer thing going? He says it like I'm some kind of hobbyist, a kid playing with blocks while everyone else is building skyscrapers. It's going well, I answer, trying to keep the edge from creeping into my voice. I've got a couple of contracts coming through. Marilyn lets out a little laugh, not loud enough to be impolite, but just enough to show she's in control. So, what exactly do you do with your computers? She tilts her head, her gaze dripping with that same superior tone. I play with them all day. I force myself not to flinch. I develop security systems for companies. Protecting their data. It's what pays the bills. That's nice, she says, flicking her blonde hair back, as though she's already moved on. Mom nods, but there's a flicker of something in her eyes. The same look she gives me every time. It's the look of someone who can't quite figure out why I haven't turned out like Marilyn. The golden child. The one who always knew what was expected of her. Marilyn gives me that smile, the one that makes my blood run cold. Actually, I might have something for you, Jackson, she says. My non-profit could use an assistant. Part-time, of course. We're growing so quickly, and I could really use someone to help out with the admin stuff. She lets the words hang in the air, like a generous offer, but there's no mistaking the underlying message. She's offering me something I'm supposed to be grateful for, something that's barely a job, just enough to keep me tethered to her, and the family's expectations. I feel the heat rise in my chest, but I swallow it down. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm focused on my business right now. Mom's face tightens at the refusal, and she sets her wine glass down a little harder than necessary. Jackson, she says, her voice syrupy sweet, why can't you just be more like Marilyn? She's helping people, Jackson. She's doing something important. Her eyes flick to Marilyn, and I can see the pride there, the same pride she's never had for me. The words slice through me, as they always do. Why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you just fit into the life they've chosen for you? The life where nothing you do is ever enough. Marilyn leans back, content in her superiority. Actually, I might have a few contacts in tech, Jackson. If you want to talk about real work, I could get you a few meetings. If you're serious about your future, that is. The sting of the words cuts through me, sharper than I expected. My face flushes, and I force myself to look away, my hands tightening around my fork. I'm doing real work, Marilyn. I'm building something on my own. Dad's laugh is the last thing I expect. Building something. Jackson. He scoffs. You're playing with code. That's not a real career. When are you going to get serious about your future? And there it is. The moment I've been dreading. The familiar crushing weight of their expectations, the impossible standard they've set for me. Nothing I do will ever be enough. I've built a company from the ground up. I've worked harder than any of them ever thought possible. But it doesn't matter. It'll never matter, because I'm not Marilyn. I'm not the one who checks all their boxes. I can't take it anymore. I'm serious, Dad, I say, my voice shaking despite myself. I'm serious about my future. It's just not the one you want for me. Marilyn tilts her head, her smile growing sharper. Well, we all have our little dreams, don't we? Some of us grow up and make them happen. She shrugs, and my parents' eyes flick to her with that familiar mix of admiration and relief. Marilyn, the one who didn't rock the boat. Marilyn, the one who stayed within the lines. I'm done. I stand up from the table, my chair scraping sharply against the floor. I'm not doing this. Not anymore. Dad's face is slack with shock. Marilyn's smile falters. But this time, I don't care. This time, I'm done. I turn to leave, the clink of silverware echoing in the silence behind me. Watch me, I mutter under my breath. But I know it's not for them anymore. I walk out of their front door into the October night, blocking their phone numbers, ignoring their Christmas cards. Their calls. For 5 years, I've worked to build something that's mine without them. They'll never see it. They'll never understand. But I will. And someday, when I walk into a room full of people who know my worth, I won't be looking for their approval anymore. I spent the next 5 years in silence. There were no phone calls, no texts, no visits back home. I blocked them all. The Grants had their perfect life, their perfect narrative, and I had my own. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was mine, and it was real. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had a mission now. I poured everything into Vanguard's shield, working long hours, coding through nights, building a cybersecurity empire with nothing but the knowledge I'd gathered over years of self-taught tech. I worked out of a dingy studio apartment, the walls lined with old tech books and empty coffee cups. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the code. The work that would make me feel like I had finally built something worthwhile, something they could never take away from me. I remember the first client like it was yesterday. They came to me with a problem, and I solved it. The moment I sent that invoice for a $50,000. I thought I might collapse from the weight of the success, but also from the weight of how long I'd waited for something to prove I wasn't a failure. I remember looking at the balance in my bank account, a number that didn't matter to anyone else but felt like a triumph to me. I was making it. Slowly, painfully, but I was making it. Nolan Pierce came into my life shortly after that. He was a former exec at a security firm, and he had a reputation that was hard to ignore. He believed in what I was building. He didn't care about my past, my family, my baggage. He cared about what I could do. He was the first person who ever saw me for what I could be, not for what I wasn't. You're gonna need help soon, he told me one night after we had finished a project together. And you're going to need a team. You can't do this alone forever. He was right, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to trust anyone, not even someone as capable as Nolan. But he stayed, and he helped me grow the company, helped me recruit the best talent, and slowly but surely, Vanguard's shield became something real. Something that could stand on its own. Something that no one could write off as a fluke. That was 5 years ago. Now, Vanguard's shield protects the critical infrastructure of 3 states. I employ 47 people, all of whom depend on me to make decisions that matter, that affect their futures. They've never asked about my past. They don't need to. They see me as I am now, not as the Grant family failure, not as the girl who could never measure up. I'm a CEO, a leader. I've had my fair share of accolades. The Forbes 35 under 35 list was a turning point. Seeing my name there, printed in bold, right alongside the tech moguls who had once made me feel like I wasn't good enough, was a victory I couldn't ignore. But it wasn't for them. It was for me. It was proof that I had built something from nothing, something that no one could take credit for but me. Still, despite all that success, despite everything I had achieved, there was always that voice in the back of my head. The one that whispered that I was still looking for their approval. That maybe, just maybe, I could show them how wrong they were. How wrong they had been about me. And then, out of nowhere, I got the text from Nolan. Your sister Marilyn is planning to expose you at Grandma's birthday party. Hired investigators to find dirt on you. This could get ugly. I stared at the message for a moment, my fingers frozen on the phone screen. I hadn't spoken to Marilyn in 5 years. Why now? What did she think she was going to find? I forwarded the message to Nolan. What does she think she's going to uncover? Nolan's reply came quickly. No idea, but she hired Ridgewell and Hartman. They're serious. I didn't need to know anything else. Marilyn was making her move, and she was going to drag me into it. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't the same girl who walked out of their perfect family 5 years ago. I wasn't the girl they had dismissed and ridiculed. I was a success, and this time, I wasn't running. I looked out the window of my penthouse, at the city lights below, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected. A strange mixture of fear and excitement. Whatever was coming, I was ready for it. For the first time, I was in control. If Marilyn thought she could destroy me, she had another thing coming. The next few days blur into a haze of growing tension. I couldn't stop thinking about the message from Nolan. Marilyn had hired private investigators, and they weren't just any investigators. Ridgewell and Hartman were known for being thorough, brutal even. They didn't just dig into your finances, they found everything. And if there was one thing I was sure of, it was that I'd kept my personal and business life completely separate from my family. There was nothing to find. Nothing. But I couldn't ignore the knot tightening in my chest. Why would Marilyn go to such lengths? What was she hoping to uncover? And why now? She hadn't cared about me in 5 years. What could possibly have changed? I dialed Nolan's number, my fingers trembling. He picked up on the first ring. Jackson, he said, his voice steady. I've been doing some digging of my own. The investigators Marilyn hired Colton Hartman. Specifically, he's former FBI. Spent 20 years specializing in financial forensics and background checks. The guy's a bulldog, Jackson. He doesn't stop until he finds what he's looking for. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk. What do you think they'll find? Not sure yet, Nolan replied. But I know one thing for sure, they're going to dig deep, and they're going to find something. He paused. But they might find something that isn't about you. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? They've been digging into Marilyn's finances too. I stared at the screen in front of me, the words spinning in my mind. What do you mean, her finances? I asked, trying to steady my voice. Colton Hartman doesn't just follow one trail, Nolan said. He follows them all. And from what I can tell, Marilyn's financials are messy, to say the least. I'm talking about embezzlement. I'm talking about a web of things that don't add up. My stomach dropped. She's been stealing from the charity. I can't say for sure yet, but I'm working on it. I've got a few people calling in some favors. Just keep your head down, Jackson. Don't give her anything she can use against you. This is bigger than you think." The world felt like it was spinning a little too fast. Marilyn, my sister, the perfect one, was hiding something. Something big. And she was so desperate to take me down, to humiliate me in front of the family, that she had been blind to the mess she'd created in her own life. It felt like poetic justice, in a way. But I couldn't let myself get distracted by that. I had to focus on what was coming next. The night of Grandma Miriam's birthday arrived, and I found myself pacing in my penthouse, getting dressed in my 3 Valenzed Armani blazer. The same blazer I'd worn for countless meetings, for moments where I needed to command respect. Tonight, I would need it more than ever. I adjusted the cuffs, looking at myself in the mirror. Who was I kidding? I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked away from that family dinner. But the ghosts of my past were still there, lurking beneath the surface. They were whispering doubts, telling me that I wasn't good enough, that walking into that party would somehow prove them right. I gritted my teeth and pushed the thoughts aside. As I walked out of the penthouse, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Nolan. "You ready for this?" I couldn't help but smile a little. I typed back, "I'll be fine. Thanks for having my back." But the truth was, I wasn't fine. Not completely. There was a part of me, still, that was terrified. Terrified of the confrontation. Terrified of seeing them all again. And most of all, terrified of the moment when Marilyn would try to expose me for everything I wasn't. I arrived at the Prairie Hills Country Lodge just as the sun was setting, casting a fiery glow across the marble steps. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. The place was grand, over the top, just like everything else in my family's life. I walked past the doorman with my head high, my stride confident, despite the pounding of my heart. Inside, the clinking of glasses and low hum of conversation filled the air. I scanned the room, spotting familiar faces. The cousins who had always judged me. The aunts and uncles who had never understood me. I felt the weight of their stares before I even walked into their line of sight. I had been the failure for so long, but tonight, they would see me for who I really was. Grandma Miriam was seated at the head of the table, her sharp eyes scanning the room, with that same knowing look she always had. She was the only one who'd ever seen me for who I truly was, and that's why I was here. I hadn't expected it to feel like this. Walking into a room full of people who never thought you'd amount to anything. It was like facing a wall of invisible judgment. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. The first thing I noticed was Marilyn. She was standing near the microphone, clearly preparing to make her move. Her smile was wide, too wide, like she was about to unveil some great, public humiliation. But the thing was, she didn't know what was coming. None of them did. I caught Nolan's eye from across the room. He was sitting at a table with a few of the other guests, his face impassive, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. We both knew that something was about to break. But neither of us could have predicted how quickly it would come. As Marilyn stepped up to the microphone, ready to make her grand speech, I felt a cold shiver run through me. This was it, the moment. But just as she opened her mouth, the doors to the ballroom swung open with the kind of force that made everyone stop in their tracks. 2 detectives, followed by an investigator from the Colorado Attorney General's office, walked in. Their badges caught the chandelier light as they scanned the room. Marilyn froze. The silence in the room was suffocating, and for one brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then the lead detective stepped forward, his voice carrying over the stunned murmurs of the crowd. "Miss Marilyn Grant." His voice cut through the room like a knife. The gasps were immediate. Marilyn's face drained of color, and her mouth hung open. She didn't speak. She didn't move. And when they cuffed her, I could see her collapse inward. That perfect golden child image she'd worked so hard to maintain finally shattering. She had tried to expose me. But tonight, It was her own truth that had been revealed. The chaos hit me like a wave. For a moment, everything felt unreal. Like I was watching someone else's nightmare unfold. The detectives led Marilyn out of the ballroom, her hands cuffed, her face a mixture of shock, rage, and something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. I stood frozen for a beat, my mind still processing what had just happened. The ballroom had gone silent, the air thick with disbelief. The only sounds were the faint murmurings from the guests, too stunned to speak any louder. And in that silence, I couldn't help but feel a rush of something, relief, maybe. Justice. But there was no time for that. I couldn't let myself feel it. Not yet. Not with the storm still brewing around me. Dad was the first to move. He rushed toward the door, his face pale, his steps faltering. Mom was right behind him, her hands trembling, clutching her pearls like they were the only thing anchoring her to reality. They reached the door just as it swung closed, cutting them off from Marilyn. And I saw the panic in their eyes. They didn't know what to do. They never knew what to do when everything fell apart. I knew that look well. They couldn't control the narrative anymore. They couldn't sweep this under the rug the way they always had. Grandma Miriam's eyes were steady as she watched them. And for a split second, I saw something in her expression, calm, unshakable. I knew then that she had been the one to set this all in motion. She was the reason the Attorney General's office had moved so fast. She was the one who had seen through Marilyn's facade long before anyone else. And now, in the face of this chaos, she didn't flinch. "Jackson," Grandma's voice cut through the tension, steady and clear. "Come sit with me." I didn't hesitate. I crossed the room to her table, feeling the eyes of the room on me. The whispers had already started, of course. They always did when something this big happened. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I wasn't the little girl they had tried to mold into their image. I sat down beside Grandma. She didn't need to say anything. The quiet strength radiating from her was enough. The others might have been scrambling, unsure of how to process the storm that had just hit, but Grandma was calm. She had seen through it all. The door opened again, and I watched as two detectives walked into the room, their presence commanding attention. They scanned the room before their eyes settled on my parents. I could feel the weight of their gaze. They knew what was coming, even if Douglas and Evelyn didn't yet. "Douglas Grant," the lead detective called, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to speak with you." Dad stiffened, his face paling even further. He looked like a man who just realized he had lost everything. Everything he had spent decades building. His perfect little world was crumbling. And he knew it. Mom stood beside him, her hand clutched to her chest, but she didn't speak. It was always Dad who took control. It was always Dad who held the reins, even when he didn't deserve them. "I didn't have anything to do with this," Dad said, his voice rising, desperation seeping into his tone. "This is all Marilyn's doing. You have to understand. I didn't know." The detective raised a hand, cutting him off. "We're not here for her, sir. We need to speak to you about the family trust. About your role in the embezzlement." The words hung in the air, thick with their own weight. The family trust. The money that had been stolen from right under their noses. The money that had funded Marilyn's extravagant lifestyle, her European vacations, her lavish dinners. The same money that had been siphoned off to line her pockets, all while she played the perfect, loyal daughter to our parents. And now, the truth was coming out. The family's perfect image was shattered. They couldn't cover it up. Not anymore. I glanced at Grandma Miriam. Her face was composed, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Triumph. Justice. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The room was a storm of whispers now, the low hum of conversations building as everyone began to realize what had just happened. The golden child wasn't so golden anymore, and the black sheep, me, wasn't the failure they had always believed. I stood up from Grandma's table, my eyes scanning the room. Everyone was watching me now, their gazes full of curiosity and judgment. But I didn't care, not anymore. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment they would finally see me for who I really was. I didn't need to say anything. The silence spoke louder than any words could. I walked through the room with my head held high, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. This wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about proving something to myself. Grandma's voice cut through the noise again, steady and firm. "Jackson, dear, come with me." I turned to her, my heart swelling with gratitude. Grandma had always been the one who believed in me. She had seen me for who I was long before anyone else did. I sat back down beside her. This time, I didn't hesitate. I felt at peace for the first time that night. The detectives continued to question my parents. I could hear the muffled voices in the background, but it didn't matter. I was finally free. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free from the years of trying to live up to their impossible standards. And now, it was all crashing down around them. They had created this mess, and now they had to live with it. I glanced at Grandma again. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. She smiled, her eyes softening. "Now, we wait." For the first time, I felt like the world was finally aligning. Marilyn's perfect world was falling apart, and I was the one who had survived. The hours after Marilyn's arrest were a blur. It was like watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. The family that had once seemed so untouchable, so perfect in their world of high society dinners, charity galas, and well-tailored smiles, was coming apart. Every carefully constructed lie was unraveling, piece by piece, right before my eyes. I stayed in the ballroom for a while, watching as my parents stumbled through their own panic. They were trying to regain control, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But nothing made sense anymore. The perfect little narrative they'd spent years spinning about Marilyn, the one they had pinned all their hopes on, was crashing to the ground. And I was standing here, watching it burn, knowing I had nothing to do with it. At first, I thought I might feel some kind of vindication. But instead, all I felt was numb. This wasn't how I had imagined it. I hadn't expected the collapse to be this loud. The whispers around me, the looks of judgment and disbelief, felt suffocating. But then, there was Grandma Miriam. She hadn't moved from her seat at the head of the table. Her eyes never left me as I walked over, and for the first time that night, I felt like I wasn't alone. "Come sit with me, dear," she said, her voice a calming presence amidst the chaos. I sat down beside her, the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I could breathe. "I thought you might be worried about this night," Grandma murmured, her voice low enough that only I could hear. But I knew what would happen. I looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "You knew." I had my suspicions about Marilyn. Too many things didn't add up, and when I found out she was involved in the family trust, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. My throat tightened as her words sank in. Grandma had known. She had known long before anyone else, and she had been the one to set this whole thing in motion. "I commissioned my own audit of the family trust 2 months ago," she continued, her tone steady. "When I saw the discrepancies, I knew we had a problem. Marilyn's been hiding things for years. The vacation home in Europe, the Mercedes, the money from the charity, it was all there." My heart was pounding now. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Grandma's smile was small, but it held a world of meaning. "I wanted to see how far she'd go. I wanted to see if she'd destroy this family just to keep her perfect image intact." The door to the ballroom swung open again, and I turned instinctively. My parents were emerging from the hallway, looking disheveled, their faces pale. Douglas, usually the one who controlled every situation with calm authority, was stumbling now, looking like a man who had just been hit with a punch he couldn't dodge. "Jackson," he said, his voice unsteady. He reached out a hand, like he was trying to pull me into their world again, to make everything seem normal, even though nothing would ever be normal again. You don't understand. This isn't how it was supposed to go." I didn't move. I didn't even look at his hand. "You're right, Dad. I don't understand." "Jackson, this is about Marilyn," Mom said, her voice cracking. She was standing next to him, her face streaked with tears. "We had no idea. We didn't know about any of this. We didn't know she was stealing from the trust. You have to believe us." I shook my head slowly, looking at her for the first time that night. "You're still trying to protect her, aren't you?" Her eyes flashed with guilt. But then there was something else there too, something I'd never seen before. Fear. They were afraid. Afraid of what this meant for their image, their status, everything they had worked so hard to protect. And they still didn't understand that none of that mattered to me anymore. "We didn't want this for you, Jackson," Dad said, his voice breaking. We just wanted you to be someone. Someone who could fit in with the family." The bitterness in my chest flared up again, but this time, I held it in. "You never cared about who I was, Dad. You only cared about who I could be for you." "I'm sorry," he whispered, looking defeated. "We were wrong." I looked at both of them, my parents, the people who had shaped so much of who I thought I had to be, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a cold distance. All those years, all that effort to win their approval, it had been a waste. They didn't see me. They never had. And now, it was too late. "I'm not your failure anymore," I said quietly, turning away from them. I couldn't look at them for another second. As I walked back to Grandma's table, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. They could think whatever they wanted. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. Grandma's hand found mine under the table, and I squeezed it, grateful for the warmth and the steadiness that had always been there. "It's all falling apart," I said, almost to myself. "It's not just falling apart," Grandma said, her voice steady as ever. "It's breaking wide open, and the truth is finally being seen. They'll understand eventually." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving them wrong anymore. It was about showing up, about standing in the wreckage of everything I had been told I couldn't be and still finding my way forward. The detectives and agents were still in the room, taking their time to get everything in order. I could feel the tension as they began to speak with various family members. But I knew the damage had already been done. Marilyn's world had crumbled, and mine was just beginning to be rebuilt. Grandma squeezed my hand again. "The storm will pass, Jackson. It always does. And when it does, you'll be standing stronger than ever." For the first time in a long time, I believed her. This was the beginning of something new. Not just for me, but for the family too. They would have to face the consequences of their actions, and I was finally going to be free of their shadows. The following days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and quiet moments of reflection. I had expected to feel some sort of victory after the bombshell at the party, after Marilyn's arrest and the family's collapse. I had expected to feel triumphant, to finally see everything I'd worked for come to fruition. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something too big to fully comprehend. The truth had been laid bare, but the fallout, how much damage had been done, was still to come. I kept my focus on the company. There was no time to dwell on what was happening at home. Vanguard Shield was still my lifeline, still my purpose. The thing that had kept me grounded for the last 5 years. Nolan had been invaluable during all this, keeping things running smoothly, making sure that the deals I'd been working on wouldn't fall apart in the middle of this chaos. But even as we signed new contracts, even as the team continued to grow, something gnawed at me. I'd spent so long running away from the family, from their expectations, from their rejection. But now, with the dust beginning to settle and the reality of what had just happened weighing on me, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was running from something else. I didn't have to wonder for long. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, a few days after the party. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I knew instantly who it was. I didn't want to answer, but my hand moved almost automatically, swiping the screen to accept. Jackson, Dad's voice came through the phone, sounding smaller than I remembered. Less commanding. It sent a shiver down my spine. Like the person on the other end wasn't the same man who had ruled my life for so long. "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "I'm sorry, son." "For everything." I closed my eyes, breathing out through my nose. The apology hung in the air, but it felt empty, like something that had been rehearsed for years, but never truly meant. They'd always known how to manipulate, how to twist words into a form of control. But this wasn't it. "You were never sorry before," I said flatly. "You never showed any remorse when I was around. So why now? Why after all this time?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a shaky breath. "I don't know. I guess it took seeing Marilyn go down like that to realize everything. Everything we've built is a lie. We've spent so much of our lives trying to keep up appearances, trying to maintain a perfect image. But none of it matters now, Jackson. None of it matters without family." I didn't respond immediately. The words felt like a blow, and yet, I didn't know what to do with them. I'd spent years trying to break free from their expectations. And now, here he was, sounding like a man who had been broken by his own actions. But was it too late for them? Was it too late for me to even care? "I'm not who you think I am," I finally said, my voice low. "I'm not your failure anymore, Dad. And I'm not the person you've been trying to force me to be. I don't need your approval. Not anymore." Another silence followed, and I could almost hear the weight of it hanging between us. "I know," he whispered. "I know you don't. But I need to tell you. I need to tell you that I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to brush them off, to reject them like I'd rejected everything else from him. But the truth was, I hadn't been prepared for this moment. Not after everything. And for a split second, I felt the small, almost desperate part of me that still wanted to hear it. To hear that I wasn't a failure in their eyes. That maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice breaking. I didn't know how to be the father you needed me to be." I wanted to say something, to tell him that it didn't matter anymore. But instead, all I could do was let the silence settle between us, knowing there was nothing more to say. Not anymore. "I have to go," I said quietly. "I'm done talking about this. I've got work to do." Jackson, I hung up, unable to hear any more. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to tell me he was proud. Not anymore. What I needed was for him to realize that the world he'd built, the one he'd tried so desperately to protect, was built on lies. And that, in the end, it was the people who tried to tear it down who would stand in the ashes, watching it burn. The rest of the day passed in a haze. The team at Vanguard's Shield kept things running smoothly, and Nolan didn't ask any questions. He knew I had a lot on my plate. He didn't need to know about the call, or the apology, that didn't change anything. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Not just with my family, but with me. I wasn't running from them anymore. I wasn't running from their expectations or their judgments. But I was still running from something. I just didn't know what. By the time I left the office that evening, the weight of everything I'd been avoiding was too much to ignore. I stood by my car for a moment, staring out at the city skyline. This was it. This was where I had built everything, everything I was, everything I had. But I was still holding something back. Maybe it was just the idea that I could still be the man my family had wanted me to be, the man they had never understood. Maybe, after all this time, I just wanted them to see me for who I was. I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back to that family. Not in the way they wanted, but I couldn't deny the pull, the strange sense of unfinished business. Tomorrow, I would face the next challenge, and whatever happened, I would do it on my terms. Just like I always had. It's been 6 months since the night at the Prairie Hills Country Lodge, and everything has changed. The family, the trust, the business. It all feels different now. The dust has settled, but the cracks in the foundation are still there, and I know they always will be. But now, I'm not just standing on the sidelines watching it all fall apart. I'm the one rebuilding it. The Grant Digital Safety Initiative sits in what used to be Marilyn's old office. I walk through the doors every day with a sense of purpose I've never had before. The floors are polished, the air smells of fresh paint, and there's a hum of productivity I never imagined in this place. Not when it was under her control. The irony isn't lost on me. I bought her failing non-profit for $1. She never thought she'd lose. She thought her perfect world was untouchable. But all it took was a single crack for everything to come tumbling down. And now, this place, her legacy, was mine to reshape. To turn it into something that actually meant something. Something real. We're not just teaching at-risk youth about cybersecurity. We're giving them the tools to protect themselves, to build futures they never thought possible. I still can't believe the way it all fell into place. I've got 23 employees now, all of them passionate about the work we're doing, all of them driven by the same mission. We're creating real change. We're doing what Marilyn claimed to do. But this time, we're doing it right. Nolan stands beside me in this, of course. He's been my rock throughout all of this. My friend. The one person I trust without question. He's the one who kept the company steady through the chaos, who made sure we stayed on track. And now, here we are, in a position to take on even more contracts, more responsibility, more power. 50 million, Nolan says, handing me a folder with a fresh contract in it. We just got the government's approval for the Voting Infrastructure Protection Program. This is big. Jackson. This is real. I take the folder from him, feeling the weight of it. It's the kind of deal that can define a company, that can shape the future. It's the kind of deal that would have been impossible for me to even dream of 5 years ago, sitting alone in that studio apartment, coding my life away. But now, it feels like the natural progression. This is what we've been working for. Let's make sure we don't screw it up, I say, my voice a little gruffer than I intended. But it's not just about the work anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can do this, that I'm not just playing with code anymore. I'm building something that matters. Nolan grins, we won't. I nod and stand up, walking to my office window. I look out at the city skyline. The same skyline I've been staring at for years, only now it feels different. There's a new energy in the air, a new sense of possibility. And it's not just from the success of Vanguard's shield. It's from the truth. The truth that I've built something real. Despite everything they tried to make me believe. Despite everything I thought I was. But then, just as the weight of it all hits me, how far I've come, how much has changed, my phone buzzes. I glance at it, and for a split second, I freeze. It's a text from Tessa. I haven't heard from her since the party, since everything fell apart. I didn't expect to hear from her again, not after everything that happened. But here it is. Jackson, the message begins. I saw the news piece about the Digital Safety Initiative. Mom says she's proud of you. I think we all are. I stare at the text for a moment, feeling the strange rush of something I can't quite name. It's not vindication. It's not triumph. It's something more complicated than that. Something softer. I hit reply. Thanks, I type, my fingers moving faster than my mind. It means more than you think. I'm sorry for how things went down. I wait, but no reply comes. Part of me wonders if she's just trying to smooth things over. Trying to make things right with me after all these years. But another part of me realizes that it doesn't matter. What matters is that I've moved on. That I've built a future for myself that's finally mine. And that, no matter what they think, no matter what they believe about me, I'm not their failure anymore. I put my phone down and walk back to my desk, staring at the contracts, the numbers, the growth. It's all falling into place now. The Grant name is no longer associated with failure, with shame. It's associated with something powerful, something capable of making a real difference. I hear the sound of footsteps approaching my office, and before I can look up, the door opens. It's Nolan again, holding a file. His grin is wide, like he's got something big to share. Guess who just approved our $50 million infrastructure deal with the government? I smile, the weight of everything finally lifting off my shoulders. It's about time, I say. Let's get to work. As I sit back in my chair, I feel a strange peace settle over me. It's not the peace of someone who's been vindicated or proven right. It's the peace of someone who's finally found their own way. Someone who has built something real and meaningful. Not for anyone else, but for themselves. I may have walked away from the family years ago, but now I'm walking towards something bigger, something more important. Something I've earned. And this time, I'm not looking back.